The Christmas tree lights twinkled cheerfully in the corner of the dining room at Dad's house in Westchester, casting a warm glow over what should have been a peaceful family dinner. Instead, I found myself sitting at the mahogany table where I'd eaten countless childhood meals, watching my family orchestrate what appeared to be the most expensive gift exchange in our family's history, involving property I actually owned. "Emma, sweetheart, we have something very special to announce," Dad said, setting down his wine glass with the ceremonial gravity he reserved for major family pronouncements. At 62, Richard Chin still commanded attention effortlessly, his success as a corporate attorney having trained him to present complex information with absolute confidence. My sister Rebecca practically vibrated with excitement in her chair, her engagement ring catching the candlelight as she clutched her fiancé David's hand. At 28, she'd inherited Dad's flair for dramatic moments and Mom's expensive taste, a combination that had produced increasingly elaborate expectations since her engagement to David Morrison, whose family owned a successful chain of luxury car dealerships across Connecticut. "Rebecca and David's wedding is going to be absolutely magical," Mom added, her voice carrying that particular tone of maternal pride mixed with social ambition. "But finding the perfect venue has been such a challenge. Everything beautiful is either booked or outrageously expensive." I continued eating my Christmas ham while processing the familiar family dynamic building around me. At 32, I'd grown accustomed to being the practical sister, the one who worked in nonprofit environmental consulting, lived modestly, and apparently existed to provide solutions to other people's expensive problems. "Which is why," Dad continued with a flourish worthy of a courtroom closing argument, "your mother and I have decided to give Rebecca and David the most meaningful wedding gift possible." He pulled out an official-looking document from his briefcase, which I now noticed had been positioned strategically beside his chair throughout dinner. "Consider this your sister's wedding gift. We're signing over the lake house," Dad announced triumphantly. "Rebecca can have her dream wedding right there on the shore of Lake George, and afterward she and David will own the property as their first marital home." The lake house. The beautiful 1920s cottage with its private dock and stunning mountain views, where our family had spent every summer of my childhood. The property Dad had inherited from his parents and always promised would stay in the family for future generations. Rebecca squealed with delight, immediately pulling out her phone to show wedding invitations she'd apparently already designed. "Look, I had them printed with the lake house address. David's parents are going to be so impressed. Waterfront property in the Adirondacks is incredibly exclusive." My fork paused halfway to my mouth as I processed what I was hearing. "The invitations are already printed?" I asked carefully. 200 copies. Rebecca gushed. "The photographer I want specializes in lakefront ceremonies. David's groomsmen can stay in the guest rooms, my bridesmaids can get ready in the master bedroom. It's going to be absolutely perfect." Dad beamed with paternal satisfaction while Mom practically glowed with the prospect of hosting a society wedding at their picturesque family property. None of them seemed to have considered one crucial detail about their generous gift. "This is so generous," David said, his voice carrying genuine gratitude mixed with obvious excitement. "Rebecca showed me pictures of the lake house last summer. The setting is incredible. Private beach, mountain views, that gorgeous stone fireplace for evening receptions." Dad nodded proudly. 4 generations of Chens have owned that property. Built by my grandfather in 1923. Expanded by my father in the 60s, completely renovated 5 years ago with modern amenities while preserving the original charm. 5 years ago. I remembered that renovation vividly. The extensive electrical work, new plumbing, updated kitchen, refinished hardwood floors. A $250,000 project that had transformed the charming but aging cottage into a luxury retreat worthy of the family legacy Dad always described. "The timing is perfect," Mom added. "Emma never uses the place anymore since she's so busy with her environmental work. It just sits empty most of the year, which seems wasteful for such a beautiful property." Rebecca nodded enthusiastically. "And David and I love spending time in the mountains. We're already planning weekend trips and holiday gatherings. Maybe even rent it out occasionally for extra income." I set down my fork and studied the 3 excited faces around the table. They'd clearly spent considerable time planning this transfer, complete with David's family's approval and Rebecca's detailed vision for lakefront entertaining. "When were you thinking of making this transfer official?" I asked. Actually, Dad smiled triumphantly, I've already prepared all the paperwork. We can sign the deed transfer right here tonight, get it notarized tomorrow and file it with the county by New Year's. Rebecca and David will own the property free and clear before their spring wedding. He spread the transfer documents across the table beside the Christmas centerpiece, revealing legal language that looked official and binding. Free and clear. I repeated. Well, there's still the mortgage balance, Dad explained casually. About $400,000 remaining from the renovation loan. But that's manageable for a young couple with good careers. David's family business is thriving and Rebecca's marketing position provides steady income. Rebecca's expression flickered slightly at the mention of a $400,000 debt, but David squeezed her hand reassuringly. We've discussed the financial responsibility, David said confidently. The property value far exceeds the mortgage balance. It's essentially a built-in investment with incredible appreciation potential. Dad nodded approvingly at his future son-in-law's business acumen. My phone buzzed discreetly. A text from Janet Morrison, Executive Vice President at First National Bank. Merry Christmas. Hope you're enjoying the holidays at the lake house. Let me know if you need anything regarding the property accounts. I deleted the message and looked at the deed transfer documents Dad wanted to sign tonight. Before we proceed, I said carefully, there might be some complications with the property transfer that we should discuss. Dad's confident expression wavered slightly. What kind of complications? I reached for my purse and pulled out my own set of documents, ones I'd been carrying since receiving them in yesterday's mail. Complications involving who actually owns the lake house currently. I spread my documents across the Christmas table beside Dad's transfer papers, the contrast between his assumptions and legal reality becoming immediately apparent. The first document was a mortgage statement addressed to Emma Patricia Chen for the Lake George property, showing a current balance of $387,642 and a payment history stretching back 5 years. Emma, Dad's voice carried a note of confusion as he studied the paperwork. Why do you have mortgage statements for my property? Because it's not your property, Dad. It's mine. The silence that followed was profound. Rebecca's excited expression froze mid-smile. David looked between the documents and my face, his business instincts recognizing a fundamental shift in the evening's trajectory. I pulled out the second document, a deed of transfer dated 5 years earlier, showing ownership of the Lake George property transferred from Richard Chin to Emma Patricia Chin for the sum of $1 and other valuable considerations. You transferred the property to me 5 years ago when you needed the renovation loan, I explained calmly. Remember? The bank wouldn't approve a $250,000 mortgage on your retirement income, but they would approve it for someone with stable employment and good credit. Dad's face went pale as the memory returned. The financial stress of wanting to renovate the family property but lacking the income to qualify for the necessary loan. His practical daughter with her steady nonprofit salary and excellent credit score providing the solution. But that was supposed to be temporary, Dad stammered. Just a financing arrangement until the renovation was complete. The arrangement was that I would take ownership and responsibility for the mortgage payments, I continued, showing him bank statements documenting 5 years of monthly payments. $4,237 every month for 60 months. Total payments so far, $254,220. Rebecca stared at the numbers, her dream of free lakefront property crumbling as the financial reality became clear. You mean Emma owns the lake house? David asked quietly. Completely. The mortgage is in my name, the deed is in my name, the property taxes are paid from my account. I gathered the documents into a neat stack. Dad, you can't transfer property you don't own to anyone. The Christmas tree lights continued twinkling cheerfully while my family processed that their generous gift was actually an attempt to give away someone else's house. But the family legacy, Dad whispered. For generations of Chens. The legacy continues, I replied gently. It just belongs to a different generation now. Rebecca looked at her printed wedding invitations with dawning horror. What am I supposed to tell my guests? Rebecca's lakefront wedding became a garden ceremony at David's parents' house in Greenwich. The invitations had to be reprinted with considerable embarrassment, and the photographer who specialized in waterfront venues was replaced with someone more experienced in suburban settings. Dad struggled for months with the realization that his attempt to give away the family property had been legally impossible. The lake house remained mine, along with the mortgage payments that would continue for another 7 years. Mom quietly suggested that Emma might consider allowing the family to use the lake house occasionally, but I reminded her that property ownership included the right to control access and usage. I kept the Lake George property as my private retreat. The cottage remains a peaceful sanctuary where I spend weekends and holidays, exactly as I'd been doing for 5 years while paying the mortgage. David and Rebecca eventually bought a modest condo in Stamford using David's family connections for the down payment. Christmas dinners resumed their normal format the following year. Family celebration without property transfers or assumptions about asset ownership. The lake house stays in the Chin family but belongs to the Chin who actually owns it. Gift giving became much simpler when it involved presents people actually possessed.